Okay, so this is my outline for today's presentation, code set styles and corridor models. And I'm going to position it like you already know how to do corridor models to a certain degree, but lots of times people will get up to a certain point in their understanding of corridor models, and then from there they just kind of back off and go to their usual CAD skills. So what I want to do is not really go through an entire workflow, but this is more of an introduction of code set styles and where you can find them and how they're going to be used and what the like a optimal workflow would be as far as like testing out which are the right styles and which ones to use in the certain situations. So this is a mind map, and we just start at the 1 o'clock position and work our way clockwise through that. And I just get it all on the right-hand side of the main topic for now. So to start off with, you get some definitions here where the code set styles are just going to be used to display corridor models. And, a lot of people will just kind of muddle through corridor modeling and just accept whatever the current style is applied and not really venture outside of that. But I wanted to show you that there's a lot more possibilities available to you. So in the help file, it tells you that as far as like a beginning strategy, you want to just take a look at the parts of a assembly that you might want to see some annotation on, or how you want linear objects to be displayed, and then that'll kind of give you a short list of things that you would like to apply certain styles to. So I know it's kind of vague right now, but let's see if we can get into some more specifics. So essentially, the two key takeaways you get out of that strategy is identify points that you want to label and assign styles, or think of assigning styles that are going to control things like color and line type and layer assignment type things. So code sets are going to be applied to corridors. So think of, where do you find a corridor, and it's either going to be displayed in a plan view, or if you flip your plan view up in 3D, the model view, and then in a cross-section view. So that's really the only places that you'll visually encounter the corridor model. Now there's other outgrowths from that, like you can extract feature lines and corridor solids and surfaces from a corridor model, but those are different objects. So the corridor itself is just going to be in plan view, section view, and the assemblies that go into making up the corridor model, well, they have sub-assemblies, and it's these code set styles that also give the display properties to the sub-assemblies when they're in what's called layout mode. So other cool things that you can do, which you may not have realized, is that you can assign these render materials. And this is like if you're going into a workflow where you're going to end up with corridor solids. And so, yeah, that is a possibility. You can have an AutoCAD solid exported from a corridor model, and you can apply a material to a solid. And so these are great for exhibits because, you can slice through them in a section to show a cross section of a solid object. You can do a 3D orbit around those things and have the visual style set up so that they can be rendered realistically. So what you might end up having on your display is like a 3D view like this, where the paved areas are going to be shaded so that they kind of look like asphalt. And then in our particular example here, we should have applied like a grass material to, and these are corridor solids that were extracted from the corridor model. So, that's how they're displaying, and this visual style is set to realistic. So all of the other window dressing around here is just the plan view planimetrics, all the linear geometry, like station labels, stuff like that, that's in there. So yeah, and inside of the style, and the code set style is where you can have a column for render materials. So this one, if you look at the title bar, it shows you that this is set up for FDOT Visualize. And other code set styles, you won't see any render materials applied because that's not their purpose. They're just to do the work of labeling or displaying linear objects and not applying, because render materials are only going to be applied to solid objects or surfaces, those types of things. So, and this, even though you don't see it, this grouping of code names is for link codes. So there's point, link, and shape type code. So we'll get to see those as we move along here. So let's just say, for example, this corridor model was really kind of overpowering in a standard view, and we were going to put together a lighting plan. Well, the lighting plan, you just kind of want to tone everything down so that the only thing that you're seeing is just going to be some simple geometry, you know, just like edge of traveled way, the face of curb, back of curb, shoulders, sidewalks, stuff like that. There's a guardrail here. So those are some of the things where it's just like, hey, you know, we need to simplify. Still want to see the corridor model, still want to get some geometry out of the corridor model. But all of the other stuff that could be applied to that, we just want to leave that in a non-displayed configuration. All right, so that's what a code set styles do. Now, what we want to do is find out in the interface, you know, how are the different ways that we can assign them, and just get some example use cases on that. So first off, if you have an assembly, well, that's used to produce a corridor model, and then there's a code set that can be applied to an assembly. And in the simplest form, you can just go to the AutoCAD properties palette and pick on an assembly, and then you'll see right down in the data area here, this is one way where you can just reassign a code set style, is right inside the properties palette. So, you know, if you're real comfortable with AutoCAD, then, you know, that's just a real easy way. You just pick on the central marker for your assembly, and then you can click through a list of code sets. So, you know, this one here, if you take a look at the display characteristics, well, it has some labels on there for some lane slopes. It has some elevation labels, and they're, of course, rotated, and they have a different color to them. And then the solids are right here. You know, these shaped areas here are just shaded with some solid fills. So you got a sidewalk there, you got curb, you've got some lane and, you know, sub base. You, if you look over here at, well, just a minute, I almost screwed up my map here. Yeah, this little gadget right here is a guardrail, so outside the sidewalk. So, okay, so, and then in the corridor properties, so you'll spend a lot of time in corridor properties. And so there's code set styles that are applied in there, but they can also be applied, yes, in the properties palette as well. So in this case right here, we've got the standard style. And what I did is I just showed you a little bit of the plan view of the corridor model. So you can see the corridor model gets pretty busy with all of this line work. This road is heading north and south. And so the sample lines are these blue lines here going perpendicular to the alignment. And that's just a standard style. So if you never venture beyond the standard style, then you're really kind of missing out. So let's just see what we can do to venture out beyond that. Well, to show you how it's all put together, when you go into the corridor properties, then on the parameters tab, this is where you discover what assembly that you're currently looking at for a particular region or a range of stations. And so you can see a tooltip there is just showing you the assembly name. And that means like you can go back into the prospector and find that assembly and do a right click on that and do a zoom to, and then go find that in the plan view. So still inside the corridor properties, if you go over to the codes tab, then this is where you start to see the classification of the different codes. So it's either going to be a link code, a point code, or a shape code. So if you're familiar with GIS, then it's kind of following the same type of logic. A link is going to be several points that are connected together. But what you got to think of this is like a feature line on a corridor would actually be tied to a point code. And that's because you're going from section sample to section sample to section sample. So you're spanning multiple stations. The link codes just sit at that one sample line, and they just connect dots along that cross-section path. So that's a link code, but just because it's a link code doesn't mean that it runs longitudinal to the alignment. It's just the part of the cross section. So just to kind of get that confusion out of the way there. So then if you click on the drop-down list, then you'll see that here's a list of all the styles that are available. And this is what's baked into the FDOT master template. And so these are the ones that are put together that will conform to the plan production manual standards. And as we go a little bit further into the corridor properties, then you see that the feature lines is where you start to see the point codes showing up here. And this is how you apply a style to a feature line that is going to be generated based on a point code. So point codes, just think of it this way, like you have the inside sidewalk right here. That's going to connect it from station to station to station on the inside edge of the sidewalk, and it's going to have a style of sidewalk front and FSW, face of sidewalk. So that's the feature line style. Okay, so just wanted to back out of that. Now this isn't going to be all just PowerPoint pictures. We're actually going to get into the application. But let me just kind of grind through my list here so that we can kind of get everything out in the open, and then we can start drilling down in the application. Okay, so another place that you're going to find code sets is when you create sample line groups, and this sample line groups are for cross sections. And so what you'll see is when you create a sample line group, then you're going to have these data sources to sample. And then in this style column here, even though the style column just says style, it's really representing code set style. And so you click on the drop-down list, and that same list that we saw previously is now available when you're developing your sample line group. So let's say you wanted to choose the assembly codes. It probably wouldn't be the best choice here, but just as an example, then you can see that what displays on an actual cross-section plotted after you assign that is, and then when you hover over, so this is a corridor model displayed in a cross-section view, and then when you hover over that, the tooltip shows you that the style that's being applied to that corridor section, and all the other goodies on there, what layer it's on, and the offset elevation. So then to just kind of drill through that a little bit more, once you get into the code set style, then you'll get into the label style composer. So I'm just kind of showing you the progression of how many dialog boxes you have to go through to get to that. So here's the label style that's going to be for, say, the baseline. And so then you go into the label style composer, and then you go into the text component editor, and this is how that particular label is defined. But you can see how you had to drill through several dialog boxes just to get to there. But you have to kind of do that with other objects as well to get down to the text component editor. But this is just for label style. So the label style is going to be part of the code set style. So once you open up the code set style for editing, then you find the label style column and you're able to drill down into that. So that means you just don't have to chase it down in the user interface on the settings tab in the tool space. So what does that do for you? Well, in this case here, you're just going to whip out a label that looks like this, Centerline Construction, and it just shows you it's State Road 7. And, so you can see that the assembly that I pointed out previously had a couple of sidewalks, a guardrail, all that stuff, but now it's in more of a skeleton view just because of that particular code set style doesn't support all of the annotation and shading and all that stuff. So you're still looking at a cross-section view here. It's just that it's got a different display characteristic based on that particular code set. So let me just roll that up here. Then when we get into the cross-section views themselves, as you're going through the Create Section Views wizard is another place where you'll find that. So, you had the sample line group, and based on what you would assign in the sample line group, as you go through and create the actual section views, then it preloads this column with the choices that you made for the sample line group. And so this one here, it's just the FDOT assembly codes, and the end result is the section views are going to look like this with the shaded results. So now the assembly codes, really, those are intended to be applied for the just the assembly and the subassembly in layout mode, and that just makes it more convenient. So you can take a look at an assembly and just see what's going to be labeled, and it helps you to glean what parameters you could assign to, say, this lane slope here. So good user feedback on that. And then as we progress to a section view, you hover over that. Same deal as before. The tooltip kind of reveals what's going on with the code set style, and that keeps you well informed at all these different stages of the game. And then also, we're getting back to where are the code set styles assigned. So we've been through the assembly, the corridor properties, the sample line group, cross-section views, and now here's the section viewer. And even in the section viewer, you can go to the section view options there, and right down at the bottom is a place where you can set up the code set style. So you're assigning these code set styles at different places in the interface, but they're not all the same style. It's just for that particular purpose is where you unleash the definition of that code set style for that section viewer. So, you might be using the mill and overlay for a section viewer, but then you might have just the assembly codes applied to the corridor model. Okay, so they're applied at different situations for the display that you're anticipating on using, but it doesn't carry through to all the other components. So, it's like independent settings as to how they're being used. Let's just break it down a little bit here. So you have the code set styles, and they're going to be found in the tool space on the settings tab and underneath your general category here, and then the multi-purpose collection. And as you drill down through there, then you see code set styles. So not real intuitive, because there is no like corridor section here, even though these apply to the corridor model. So there's the same list that we saw in the drop-down list, and that's just how you found that through the settings tab. And then once you get into a specific property of a code set, there's the corridor properties, then you go to the codes. So we saw that previously. But what I wanted to point out is all these column headings here. Some of those are going to be used in certain situations, and some of them won't. Like for instance, if you were looking at a point code, then you're not going to have a render material applied to a point code because that's just inappropriate. So this is just kind of like a, a one-size-fits-all interface for all the different column headings, but they're just used when it's appropriate. So that's for link, point, and shape codes there. All right, so I just wanted to give you that little breakdown. So let's take a look at Civil 3D and just kind of poke around with some stuff here, just to give you an idea of some data sets. So this is the model RD design. This is where you're going to be doing your corridor modeling. If you take a look at these assemblies here, here's the assembly marker. And when you click on the assembly marker, then you can just right click and go to AutoCAD properties, and this is where you see that you have the mill and overlay error code set style. Now when you click on the drop down list, there's other choices there. So if you just went to say the FDOT assembly codes, and that should change the display. Take a look at standard. Maybe I'm not zoomed in close enough to really see that, but at least you can see the big circles change there when we change to standard. And yes, there is a way to make those circles smaller. That's like one of the first things I reach for is, how do I get rid of those circles? Okay, so yeah, and this isn't really stretched out so you can see all that stuff. So I should probably hover over these just so you can see what the name is. All right, so let's go back to the mill and overlay. And now we're back to there. So if you zoom in, you get to see there's like a little hatch pattern there for the different material layers. And then you get out to this shoulder, little extension on the shoulder. And then it goes to, this actually happens to be a median depressed ditch. That's so sad. And then we get out to the sidewalk here. So what I had wrote myself a note here, and Brian's turned off the link width and slope. I did that because when you're exporting solids, then that link, if it's visible, it actually produces a solid. So this is what the a similar assembly looks like, and if you just take a look at that, it's the link width and slope. That's what I shut off over here. So you could just go into the assembly properties, go find that subassembly, and turn the link back on, set it to true. And there's one over here too. So what is the link and offset doing? Well, essentially what it does is it just establishes the position of this outer edge here. And so then, you can use a transition alignment to control its horizontal position, and then it just kind of works its way back along this structure of the sidewalk until you hit a marked point, and then the marked point will connect to the depressed median to kind of close that geometry in there. So it's just kind of like a unusual way of connecting things together, but it seems to work. So nice job. All right, so now let's go back to the corridor. Here's some solids here, so I might have a little bit of difficulty finding the corridor model. If I use my selection cycling here, then there we go. So here's a bunch of corridor solids that were exported, and so that was something that was just derived from one of the reporting tools out there where you can extract a corridor solid. Okay, so now if you go over to the tool space here, let me just get rid of this thing. Here's the corridor model that we're currently working on. And so if I select that, then you should see that selected in here, or at least highlighted. Let's go into the properties of that. And then you can see that there's a FDOT code set style that's being assigned to that. And what you won't see in here is a whole lot of controllable details. You try to click on this stuff here and you can't edit that. So let's take a look at the point codes just by editing the code set style from here. So luckily, we can go into the corridor properties and we can poke around with what styles are available. And then we have to open up each one individually just to see what the definition is. But now you get to see, well, what's being labeled for point codes, and what feature line styles are being applied here. So it's all just kind of standard in this case here until we get something interesting. Not in this particular code set though, because that's just for cross sections. So the feature lines, they would be displayed in the plan view and not necessarily cross section view, but the label styles, those can be displayed in the section views. So just wanted to show you how it's all connected together from a corridor model perspective. So now let's take a look at a cross-section drawing here. So in this particular cross-section drawing, the corridor model isn't actually in this drawing. You see how the corridor is blank right there? The corridor model is being sampled as an XREF. So not a data reference, but an external reference. And so you can derive your cross-sections just from sampling through an XREF. And what does that do to the code set style? Well, it just gives you some limitations on how you can apply that code set. If there's no corridor model, how would you apply the code set? Well, you can go up to the alignment and drill down underneath the alignment and look at the sample line group. So this is a way that you can affect your cross sections, just by going to the sample line group. You go to the properties in here, and now you get to choose the style that's going to be applied to that. So here's the existing ground corridor model, and then here's the design corridor model. Okay, so in this one here, it has a mill and overlay with some error checking on there. So this is going to be used for a design mode. Of course, you don't want the errors to display in the final mode on that. So this is just to assist you in seeking out where the design parameters couldn't be applied. So let me just zoom in a little bit closer here so you can see if there's going to be a change in the way things are displayed if I change the style. Okay, so let's just choose a different style here. Now, since I'm like 2 dialog boxes away from the drawing editor, then the changes that I make here are not going to be immediate. So let's just say I go to a typical cross section, click on OK. Now I got to click on Apply before things can actually change. And notice how the labels went away, the shading went away. You still get to see the geometry here, but it's just a nice minimalized view of that. And so that's a code set style being applied through a sample line group, and the corridor model doesn't even exist inside of this particular drawing. Okay, then the other example that I showed you as far as like the lighting plan. Here's a lighting plan, and what I did is I broke it up into 2 different windows here, or viewports. So this is the plan view over here, and this is how the code set style is being applied to a corridor model, and it's only just showing you feature lines. So in a plan view, it's kind of hard to tell what that really represents. You can just hover over that, you can see, corridor feature lines. At least the tooltip shows you what's going on here. And inside the tooltip, it shows you the name of the code set style. That's the FDOT Corridor Planimetric View. So that's the one that you want to use if you really want to just clean up your display and you don't want to see all of this cross-section noise in your drawing. You simply just want to see, just like you had done the geometry and the DSGN RD file, your design file, just like 2D planimetrics, but these are actually 3D feature lines. But they look like nice, clean 2D geometry. But when you flip that up into 3D, because the 3D view kind of shows you what's going on with each cross section, now you can see how things are connected together. So if I hover over that, you can see there's the feature line, and it represents the back of curb. because now you can see at the bottom of the tooltip, it shows you the point code. So it's a point code that goes from station to station to station, you know, sample line here, sample line there. Now we're talking about corridor section sampling, not the cross-section view sample line group. You know, this is just the sampling interval baked into the frequency of your corridor model. So you can see that, you know, you've got your shape for the curbing here, and then you get your lane line. And let's see if we can get my, sorry about that. Okay, and then there's a sidewalk, and then there's a some railing on that particular side of the road there. So you flip it up in 3D, you can kind of get an insight as to how things are connected. But in the plan view, it does just the right job for you just by shutting all this other stuff off. Okay, so then let's go back into what matters most. So the first thing that's going to help you out is you want to know which code set is going to be appropriate for which use conditions. And lots of times it gives you a hint with that little descriptor in here. So if we go into your tool space, into the settings, and let's just drill down in there and take a look at a couple of descriptors. And those are going to help you out as far as understanding what's available and how is it going to be applied. So I'm back in the model RD drawing. Let's go under the settings here. Under general, multi-purpose, code set styles, and look at all the goodies we have here. So now you can just hover over these things and just take a look at the description in there. It says displays FDOT milling and overlay errors in the corridor. This is to be used for layout and troubleshooting purposes. Okay, so there's a start of some good advice for us there. How about this assembly codes? Contains all FDOT codes to be used for layout and troubleshooting purposes. Well, that was kind of a repeat. But it also says that it was updated for some changes in the sub-assemblies in the releases prior to the current one here. Okay, now if we wanted to visualize things, and so it tells you briefly that it's going to apply materials. So remember, we kind of dug into that materials column there for the render materials, and that was assigned when we took a look at the visual styles here. Drainage, used for drainage sections. Okay, notice how it said sections, not necessarily plan view. And of course, existing conditions is going to be here. So that's a good place to start, is just to kind of hover over this, and the tooltips are going to show you what's going on with the just by following a description. And like I had said before, the point codes are used to draw feature lines. Okay, so it's not link codes, it's point codes. And then we took a look at this. We saw that screen capture before. We kind of discussed that, so that's good. We can move on from there. You see a tooltip. Remember, we had seen that tooltip before, just kind of checking through that. What I didn't do is I didn't go into the corridor properties. So if you just kind of follow the logic here, the corridor properties is a kind of a crunch down screen capture, but you should be able to see that okay. So inside the corridor properties, you'd go to the codes tab on there, and let's just say we're going to pick on back of curb. So here's your back of curb here, and if you go and edit, so this is the planimetric view, because remember, we're doing that lighting plan and we wanted to dumb things down to just simple geometry. So you click on this little edit button here that opens up this little code style editor, and then you can drill down into the back of curve. So this would be a point style. So see the point category over here, back of curve. So this is where you find the equivalent over here. And then this is where the feature line style is being applied to that particular point code. So that just kind of helps you to connect the dots on it. Now, going a little bit further, if you take a look at the feature lines, this is still inside the corridor properties. And on the feature lines, that's definitely going to give you all of the point codes here. And so this is another location where you see that same feature line style being represented there. So just a couple of different places. This one's inside of the, if you had edited the code set style, you'd find the assignment there. And you could just drift right over here to the feature lines tab in the corridor properties and find that back of curb style there. Alrighty, so just trying to help you connect the dots, so to speak, because that's easy to get lost in this sea of material. Alrighty, now let's take a look at, we got the point codes there, code set style for cross sections, and we took a look at the section viewer, and inside the section viewer, this is where the results. So if you're actually looking, you go into the section viewer and it shows you that grid, and so this one here, we just applied the mill and overlay, and it looks like this in the section viewer. So with the labels, the slopes on there, the shading. Actually, I don't think this is mill and overlay. I think that's the assembly features that are displayed here, because this should show you like crosshatch type of display on that. So you got a little mismatch in my screen captures, but just to show you the progression of logic, you go into the section viewer, you assign a code set style there, and the results will be updated inside your display there. So then some other things that kind of in the same mode as we'd used before, you go into the codes tab in the corridor properties, you find like the edge of traveled way, and then you can edit the code set style. And when you drill down into the actual label style, then in the label style composer is where you actually find this elevation label for the edge of traveled way. So if you're starting from corridor properties, that's one way to drill into what you're going to see as the final output. Because you don't really know what's being assigned to that edge of traveled way until you actually find the code and where it's being used. And you'll find that in the corridor properties. So if you start there and then just drill down through the user interface, then, if you need to, say, change a precision setting, or maybe the offset distance away from the label on there, the Y offset in there for the label. Those are some of the things you might need to make some minor adjustments in the style, but to find the style, you got to start somewhere. And my recommendation is go to the corridor properties and find that particular code within the code set. Okay, so that's just some practical usage tips on there. And then for shapes, here's what the assembly looks like, and this is what the cross-section looks like. So if we were to apply this cross-section style inside of a cross-section view, then this is what you get. You get kind of that skeletonized view, so it's not shaded. And so that shows you how things are all connected there. Alrighty, so link codes. Now you think of when you're in the corridor properties and you're creating a surface, a corridor surface, what are you choosing? You're choosing the link codes. Okay, so if something is coded as a top link, then remember those links are going from, well, take a look at an assembly just for a second here. If we go into, even something as simple as this, what would the top surface look like on this? Well, it would go from this subassembly to this subassembly, all the way across, and just the top links in these, because these have thickness to them, so there's a top and a bottom. So it's just the top link that's going to be coded as a top to develop that terrain model. Okay, so, but you can see that it's jumping from all these different subassembly types. And so a link code is really just connecting the dots within that single station cross-section-ish kind of components. So links are different than the point codes that would generate feature lines. So I just wanted to kind of get that beat into you. So that's for surface creation. The link codes connect the points from section to section. And shape codes. So you saw the cross-sectional area. When you're doing material volumes, then that cross-sectional area at a station, you think of how you calculate average end area. It's like that square footage of a cross-sectional area compared to, or you add it to the next forward station. And so you average the two, and then you multiply by the distance between them that they've traveled. And that gives you the volume for the materials. So the shape codes are instrumental in calculating the material volumes. And code set styles, in comparison for the final output, things look kind of bare bones. But when you're in the midst of design, then you can make things nice and complex. So you get a lot of feedback, awareness of what you're using for elevations and slopes and the different subcomponents that you have in here. So that's the contrast that you have, is you can go from something fairly complex in its display and then just scale it back for the final display that you're going to be plotting out. And this is just captured from a PDF as the final output.